The battlefield was never a place for the faint-hearted. In ancient times, soldiers who showed cowardice often faced fates worse than death, branded as traitors, exiled, or subjected to punishments so severe they served as a warning to all among the most feared. Rome's brutal practice of decimation, a punishment so ruthless it turned an army against itself. In the unforgiving world of the Roman military, there was no tolerance for failure. Discipline was the backbone of the legions, and those who displayed cowardice faced a fate more terrifying than battle itself: decimation. This punishment was not just execution, it was a spectacle of fear, a calculated measure to burn loyalty into the souls of every surviving soldier. The process was simple and ruthless. Men were gathered, lots were drawn, and 1 in every 10 was sentenced to death, not by the hands of executioners, but by their own comrades. Beaten, stoned, or clubbed to death, these doomed soldiers served as a grim warning. Fear would not be tolerated, and weakness would be punished with unrelenting brutality. The most infamous case of decimation came in the aftermath of the Battle of Cannae in 216. BCE. Hannibal's Carthaginian forces had annihilated a Roman army of nearly 86,000 men, leaving the Republic in shock. As Rome reeled from one of its worst defeats, suspicion and anger turned inward. The surviving legions, those who had fled the battlefield, were not granted mercy, rather than outright execution. The Roman Senate ordered their decimation. Hundreds were killed, not just as punishment, but as a statement. Rome would rather butcher its own than allow cowardice to spread. The survivors, stripped of weapons and humiliated, were exiled to Sicily, never to see battle. But decimation did not die with the Republic. Emperor Augustus, in the late 1st century BCE, reportedly revived it to discipline mutinous or disloyal legions. The message was clear: Rome was built on the steel of its warriors, and those who faltered would serve as an example, one that future generations would never forget. Dishonored hoplites, the Greek shame for cowardice. In the world of ancient Greece, cowardice was not punished by death, but by something far worse: lifelong disgrace. 2. A Greek warrior. Honor was everything. A man who turned his back in battle was not just an individual failure. He became a stain upon his family, his city, and the ideals of the polis itself. Death was preferable to the shame of surviving through fear. Even the great Alcibiades, one of Athens' most brilliant but controversial generals, was not spared from this ruthless judgment. In the late 5th century BCE, amid the chaos of the Peloponnesian War, he was accused of abandoning his city at a crucial moment, though he had not fled a battlefield in terror. His decision to escape rather than face trial was seen as an act of betrayal. Athens responded with exile, a punishment worse than death for a man of his stature. His name became a cautionary tale, a warning of what happened to those who placed their own survival above the city's honor. But no Greek state was more unforgiving than Sparta. For a Spartan, cowardice meant absolute social annihilation. A warrior who fled battle was stripped of all status, forced to wear rags instead of armor, and even denied the right to marry. In a society that revered strength above all else, to be branded a coward was a fate worse than death. The shame of military failure also haunted Athens after the Battle of Delium in 424 BCE, when Athenian hoplites abandoned their comrades in a disastrous retreat. They returned home not as soldiers but as pariahs. In a democratic city where reputation was everything, public disgrace could ruin a man's life. For Greek warriors, fear was never an excuse, only an unerasable mark of dishonor. Genghis Khan's ruthless executions for retreating warriors. To fight under Genghis Khan was to embrace the brutal, unyielding laws of the Mongol Empire, where failure was never tolerated and disobedience meant certain death. The Mongol war machine was not built on mere strength, but on absolute discipline. Every soldier understood that cowardice was not an option, for the great Khan had no use for the weak. Those who abandoned the battlefield did not just risk humiliation, they invited swift and merciless execution. During the Mongol conquests of the 13th century, Genghis Khan enforced a zero-tolerance policy for retreating warriors. One infamous account tells of a Mongol army retreating prematurely against the Cowardice Empire. When they returned to camp, Genghis Khan ordered every 10th soldier to be put to death, ensuring that the fear of their leader outweighed the fear of the enemy. Unlike Rome's decimation, which relied on chance, the Mongols often targeted officers and commanders, first holding them personally responsible for the failure. Consequences of cowardice extended beyond the battlefield. If an entire unit was found guilty of retreating without orders, their families could also suffer execution. This was not just punishment. It was a psychological weapon, ensuring that every Mongol warrior fought with the full force of a man who knew there was no alternative but victory. Even in death, Genghis Khan's reputation as a merciless enforcer of discipline remained legendary. His successors upheld these brutal methods, cementing the Mongol army's fearsome reputation in the empire of the Khans. There were no second chances, only unwavering loyalty or a swift and final reckoning. Medieval knightly disgrace. In the medieval world, where a knight's honor was worth more than his life, cowardice was the ultimate betrayal. A knight was not simply a warrior. He was a symbol of chivalry, duty, and unshakable courage to flee the battlefield, to shatter that image, reducing a once proud warrior to nothing more than a disgrace. And the punishment for such failure was not always death, but something far worse: public humiliation and the loss of everything that made a knight. One of the harshest penalties was the ritual of degradation, in which a dishonored knight was stripped of his rank in a ceremony as painful as any battlefield wound. His spurs, once a mark of his status, were violently hacked off. His sword, the very symbol of his knighthood, was broken. In front of him, some accounts describe knights being forced to kneel in the dirt as their shields were stomped upon the coat of arms, their family's legacy. But the dishonor did not end there. A cowardly knight could be banished from his land, cast out of noble society, and left to wander as a man without a name. In some cases, he was forced to wear rags. Instead of armor, a living reminder of his disgrace, others, unable to bear the shame, chose exile or even self-imposed death rather than live as outcasts in a time when legacy was everything. A knight who fled battle did not merely lose his title, he lost his very identity. His name became a whisper of failure, a warning to all who carried a sword. Bravery was not just expected, it was demanded. Samurai seppuku, the price of failing in battle. In feudal Japan, the samurai did not fear death, they feared dishonor. A warrior who retreated from battle or failed in his duty did not merely disgrace himself, he brought shame upon his clan, his ancestors, and the very code that defined his existence. The Bushido Code, the sacred path of the warrior, demanded absolute loyalty and unshakable courage. To show fear or fall short of expectations was an unforgivable failure, one that had only one path to redemption. Seppuku was not a punishment imposed by rulers. It was a duty embraced by the warrior himself. A samurai who had lost a critical battle or failed his lord was often given a choice: live in disgrace or restore his honor through a solemn ritual and an act of unwavering resolve. He would kneel in ceremonial attire, prepare his blade, and proceed with a ritualized act of self. This moment was often witnessed by fellow warriors, reinforcing the samurai's ultimate commitment to honor. In many cases, a second warrior would stand by to swiftly complete the ritual, ensuring the process remained dignified. This was not just a consequence, it was a declaration. A samurai who accepted this path demonstrated that his devotion to his code was unbreakable. Even in failure in Japan's warrior culture, disgrace could be erased, but honor earned through sacrifice and loyalty was eternal. History has never been kind to those who falter in battle. Across empires, Indira's cowardice was seen not as a mere personal failure, but as a disease that threatened the very foundation of armies and nations. And so the punishments were severe, designed not just to eliminate the weak, but to instill fear in those who remained. These brutal measures shaped the warriors who followed, forging them into the unbreakable forces that built and defended civilizations. But history's judgment is not bound to the past. The weight of these choices, these punishments, and these lessons still lingers. Strength was demanded, loyalty was enforced, and for those who wavered, history did not forget. The fear of dishonor, the dread of disgrace, and the harsh consequences for failure have left their mark on societies long after the swords have rusted and the empires have fallen. In the military cultures of ancient Rome, Greece, Mongolia, medieval Europe, and Japan, the price of failure was not simply death, but a loss of everything that gave a man values, identity, his name, and his legacy. For the Romans, decimation was the ultimate punishment for cowardice. It was a method that not only killed but humiliated those who failed their comrades. On the battlefields of ancient Greece and Sparta, the shame of cowardice was greater than death itself, and it carried with it lifelong disgrace that no warrior could escape. The Mongols under Genghis Khan instilled fear and loyalty through brutal executions of retreating soldiers, ensuring that failure to fight was punished with immediate death. A similar ruthlessness existed in medieval Europe, where knights who fled the battlefield were not just dishonored but stripped of their entire identity and relegated to the status of outcasts. And in Japan, the samurai upheld a culture where even the hint of cowardice could lead to an honorable death, through restoring the warrior's honor but forever marking the failure of his duty with the ultimate sacrifice. These punishments were not just acts of vengeance, they were lessons in loyalty, discipline, and the unyielding demand for bravery in the face of danger. In each of these cultures, the consequences for cowardice were designed to enforce an unbreakable code of conduct, one that demanded that no matter the odds, no matter the fear, a warrior must fight to the death for his honor and his comrades. These brutal practices served as warnings not just to those who failed, but to all who stood in the ranks, to remind them that their loyalty, their bravery, and their discipline were the most important qualities they possessed. The idea of failure in battle being worse than death transcended cultures and echoed through the ages, leaving a legacy of fear and discipline that shaped the course of history. But as we look back on these harsh practices, we must ask ourselves, was this extreme punishment truly necessary? Did the brutal enforcement of honor and bravery create stronger warriors, or did it simply foster a culture of fear and obedience that crushed any semblance of humanity and compassion? In the name of duty, in the end, the question remains whether these practices ultimately made these societies stronger, or whether they revealed a dark side of humanity, where power and fear became tools for control. And yet the brutal lessons of the past continue to be remembered as a testament to the lengths people will go to enforce loyalty and honor in the face of overwhelming odds. These warriors and soldiers may be long gone, but the ideals they upheld continue to resonate in the world's militaries even today, as they strive to maintain discipline, order, and loyalty in the face of battle and war. The price of failure in battle has always been high, but the ultimate question is whether the punishment was ever justified. or whether it was a harsh reminder of the darkness that resides within human nature and the extremes people will go to in order to maintain power and control. As history moves forward, it becomes clear that the legacy of these brutal practices lives on, not just in the stories of warriors, but in the ideals that continue to drive nations and their military forces today. The question of cowardice and the price of failure in battle will always be part of the warrior's journey, but perhaps it is time to question the methods used to enforce these ideals and whether humanity can find a better way to honor the brave and punish the weak without resorting to fear and death.